All right, welcome to the Big Texas Podcast presented by Texas Young Republicans. I'm your host, Jordan Overturf, sheltering in place, right? Doing our part to flatten the curve, making sure we're not going out, doing any non-essential trips, whatever those might be. CDC announcing that maybe wearing any kind of a mask, cloth mask, any kind of a mask. Good idea. So here we are, the new era that we live in here in Texas, in America, and the world, in a post-coronavirus world. What will that look like? Still to be determined, but that's okay because we are not letting this get us down. We are more determined than ever to reach out to more young Republicans in Texas, to reach out to voters, and to help promote candidates who are out there either on the front lines of this response or they are doing their part to help inform their communities about what's going on. We will get past this and we will return to normalcy, whatever that looks like, again, in a post-coronavirus world. But I think we're learning a lot from about ourselves, about each other, about our government, how that works, and about ways that we can improve things for down the road because I'm not an expert in this by any means, but it seems like this is something that could happen again. It's happened plenty of times in history before. So what's to stop it from being something new, 20 years from now, 5 years from now, who knows, right? Things will begin to become more clear once we get past the response and we do more research into how this all came to be and how we can be better at that process. But that's for another day. Before we get to my guest today, we actually have some housekeeping. That's right. We are getting ourselves geared up for what is going to be a huge year in politics and campaigns. Texas YRs are coming together. We've got new strategies, new ideas on how we can reach out to people. So first thing you need to do, go to the Texas YRs Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram at Texas YRs. Make sure you are following us this Thursday. Texas YR Rachel Malone is going to be hosting a live stream at 8 p.m. Again, this is this Thursday, April the 9th, right? Is that date right? I don't even know what date it is anymore. April 9th. She will be hosting a live stream on Texas YR's Facebook page, basically giving the 4 principles of disruption conversations. We have a lot of conversation these days that when it comes to politics, we start to butt heads with folks. We want to figure out ways that we can get people to change their way of thinking. How do you interact with one another? A, be civil, but B, also get them to start to turn their thinking toward the way you look at the world. Honestly, this is the way we're going to kind of be able to find common ground again, is learn to have conversations with one another and not go into these knee-jerk encampments. So I look forward to seeing what Rachel has to say. Again, 8 p.m. on Thursday, April 9th, Texas YR Facebook page. Make sure you go and check that out. While you are there, make sure you reach out to Matt Dorsey, our political director. We'll continue to do these live trainings on a variety of topics, but we're also making sure we are helping out the Texas GOP and its 10K for 10R effort. This is where you sign up, you get the contact for 10 people that we strongly believe are Republican voters that are not registered. You will call them, reach them out from a safe social distance, right? But you will call them and you will find, why it is they haven't registered and try and encourage them to go out and get registered. Now's a great time. They can drop by the post office. They can request for a form to be sent to them. Actually, in the 10K for 10R program, if they want a form sent to them, we have the ability to do that. So if you want to sign up now and bypass Matt, you can do that at texasgop.org. Or you can reach out to Matt, political director at texasyr.gop. Okay. And then we've got something else coming up. I can't tell you everything about it, but let me just tell you why ours are going to be social. We're going to use technology to connect with one another again. I hope to bring you that information soon on an upcoming podcast, but the chairman won't let me. That's right, Hayden. I'm calling you out, but that's all right. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. We can't wait to tell you about it. I just can't do it right now. All right. All right. That's enough. Housekeeping is over. My guest today, retired Rear Admiral Ronny Jackson, the very same, the former physician to the Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump. He has been there. He's been a medical advisor. We get into his background and how he came up as a young Texas boy working the oil fields to becoming the leading medical advisor for presidents of the United States. It's an amazing story. And we also look at his experience and planning for pandemics in the White House and what exactly to make of all of the criticisms that are being lobbed at the president at this time. You know, of course, the media is doing what it's doing, and you know, especially the progressive left is trying to stick anything to the president that they can. But Admiral Jackson clears all that up, lets us know exactly how this response is going, whether or not we are on the right path, if we are, you know, doing things the right way here. Quick answer is yes, right? But listen to the interview. Find out more about him. He's running in TX-13. He's in a runoff, so we'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly about coronavirus, how we're responding, what are we doing. But I'm talking too much. I'm always talking too much. Guys, I'm so sorry, but I appreciate you for listening. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Admiral Ronny Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who have somehow missed the boat on you and your background, can you give our listeners just a quick rundown of who you are and your experience?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. So my name is Ronny Jackson, and I'm a Texas native. I was born and raised in the Panhandle of Texas in Levelland. I don't know how many of your listeners know where that's at, but it's the base of the Panhandle, Levelland, Texas. Small, rural farming community. Survives basically on two things: oil and gas, and cotton, and that's it. And so that's where I was born and raised. I graduated from Loveland High School. I attended junior college at South Plains College for a couple of years. I was a biology major. I did that mainly because I couldn't afford to go to school anywhere else. I grew up in a very blue collar family. My father was an electrician. My mom was a homemaker. They provided for us, they put food on the table. But we didn't have a lot of extra income to do things like college education, things of that nature. So I ended up going to South Plains College. It was only like a $13 semester hour at the time. I could afford that. I've been working full time since about the age of 13 or 14, stacking groceries at United Supermarket, stacking, checking, stocking, whatever needed to be done. Did that, literally worked full time all through middle school, high school, and junior high. Worked anywhere from 32 to 60 hours a week. Paying for everything. You know, I bought my own vehicles, my own furniture for my room, my own clothes, everything. And when I got out of high school and I decided that I wanted to go to college, I actually got a job working as a roustabout in the oil field. And that's how I made most of my money for college. Paid for my education at South Plains College. And then I decided that I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I ended up going to Texas A&M at Galveston. I was a marine biology major. And I still went home every summer, every spring break, every Christmas break. If I had more than 3 days off, I was back home out in the oil field working to make some money for the next semester for books, tuition, and fees. I did that, made it through college. I worked on campus as well. I was a resident advisor. I worked in one of the labs there. It's actually how I met my wife. I was the RA. I took my wife into a room at Texas A&M. That's how we met. And so I did that. And while I was in med school, though, after I met my wife, I was still a little bit short on money as far as going out and having much of a social life. So I actually went across the way there in Galveston to the University of Texas Medical Branch, which is the largest medical school in the UT system, I think in the state of Texas. It was the first medical school for the University of Texas. And so I went over there and I was just trying to get an extra job to make a little extra money. I asked them if they had something I could do. I figured they'd put me in a lab, working in a chemistry lab or something like that. And so they did. They said, yeah, we got something for you to do, but we're going to put you in the pathology department and you're going to be an autopsy assistant. And I said, wow. I said, okay, well, that's not what I was expecting, but I'll do it. So I went ahead and took that job, and I started working as an autopsy assistant. And it was, it's not what I saw myself doing when I was, when I went to college, but I was I was actually doing the dissections. I would open the body up and take all the organs out. And I would take the skull off and take the brain out, and I would pass it down to the end of the table. The pathology resident would dissect everything out and figure out why the person died. And but what happened is they started teaching me a little bit when I was doing this. They were like, hey, come down here. You remember that liver you took out yesterday? And I was like, yeah. They were, look at this guy. This guy's liver, see the difference, he's got liver cancer. And so they started teaching me a little bit about medicine. So I kind of got interested in maybe being a doctor. And that was really the first time it had ever crossed my mind my entire life. I'd never even considered being a physician. And but I knew when I did it, when I decided that's what I wanted to do, that I wanted to be an emergency medicine doc, just because it was kind of my thing. I've worked as a volunteer firefighter when I was growing up for years, and I come from a family of firefighters and people that worked as EMTs and things of that nature, and I spent a lot of time working with them. So I knew I wanted to be an emergency medicine doc, but I was confronted with one big problem. The big problem being, now I wanted to go to medical school, but I really couldn't afford that. I mean, I'd made ends meet in undergrad at South Plains College in Texas A&M, but med school is going to be a different ballgame altogether. So I'd been in the Corps my first semester, the Corps Cadets my first semester at Texas A&M. So I thought, well, maybe the military has a medical school, and I can go there, and I wouldn't have to pay for it. So I reached out to the military, and they told me they didn't have a medical school. Turns out they do. They have a youth medical school up in Maryland, but they told me they didn't have one. But they said, we have this program that if you get into medical school, we'll pay for your med school, but you got to get in somewhere in the United States first. So I said, okay. So I went ahead and applied for med school. I just applied to in-state schools because I figured if this didn't work out, there's no way I could afford to go out of state. I got into UTMB, University of Texas Medical Branch, where I was working, and that's where I really wanted to go. That's where my soon-to-be wife was, and most of my friends were at the time. So I got into that, and then I called the Navy back, and I said, hey, I got in. And they said, okay, well, let's fill out the scholarship paperwork. I did, and I got the scholarship. So I was in 4 years. They paid for my 4 years in med school. I was in 4 years back, it's year for year. So it was actually a pretty good deal. But and I figured I'd just do my 4 years, and then I'd get out and go be an emergency medicine doc somewhere there in Texas, make a lot of money or, whatever. But I really got hooked on it. I mean, I enjoyed the service to my country, but I love my job. And what happened was, I told you I was a marine biology major, but I found out about a program when I got in there. It's called the Diving Medical Officer Program, where you could be a diver and a doctor. And I thought, man, this is like tailor-made for me. So I applied for that program. I got into it. They sent me to Navy Deep Sea Diving School in Panama City, Florida for 6 months. I became a fully qualified Navy Deep Sea diver, and that means that at the time I was a diver and I was a doctor. And so for the next 5 or 6 years, they just preferentially assigned me to diving units. So I traveled all over the world, and I was with explosive ordnance disposal teams, underwater demolition teams, underwater salvage teams, Navy SEALs. That's what I did, and that's what really got me hooked, because a large part of my job was just fun. I mean, I was spending most of my time like jumping out of airplanes, fast roping out of helicopters, locking out of submarines with the SEAL team, shooting weapons, blowing stuff up. I mean, it was kind of like being 12 years old and getting paid for it. It was awesome. So I ended up staying in the military and made a career out of it. And when I realized at some point, though, about 5 years into this diving medical officer stuff that I was doing, that I needed to get board certified in something, or I wasn't going to continue to get promoted in the military. And that's when I went back to, wanting to be an emergency medicine doc. Because prior to that, I was a diving doctor, which is like a general practice doctor that was also a Navy Deep Sea diver. So I applied for the emergency medicine residency program, got into that, went to the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia, and went through their residency program in emergency medicine, became a board-certified emergency medicine physician. And at the time, it was 2004, 2005. That was right about the time that the war in Iraq and Afghanistan were pretty hot and heavy. And if you were a Navy board-certified emergency medicine doc, by default, you belong to the United States Marine Corps, because that's where they needed it. So as soon as I finished my residency and got board-certified, they sent me straight to Camp Lejeune. I married up with the 2nd Marines, and I went straight to Iraq with the Marines. And I was the officer in charge of the resuscitation component of a surgical shock trauma platoon that was right on the battlefield. At a place called Dakota. They called it CQ, and it was right outside of Ramadi. It was a violently contested area of Iraq, and every day we'd get 3 to 4, sometimes 4 or 5 bad casualties a day. Now, some days we wouldn't get any, but some days we get 15 all at once. And these were guys who were coming in with their arms and legs blown off, with the dislocations, with their bowels hanging out, all kinds of total body surface area burns, horrible stuff. But I did that for almost a year in Iraq. And while I was there, I got off the job as a White House physician, which I didn't even know existed. I'd never even heard of it. But it turns out that at the time, there were 6 physicians at the White House in the military. There were 6 physicians total. They were all military, 2 Army, 2 Navy, 2 Air Force. And the Navy guy was getting ready to rotate out, and they decided that they wanted an emergency medicine doctor because none of them were ER doctors. So my specialty, the guy that controls my career and where I'm living and where my kids go to school and the job I have and everything else, he threw my name in the hat, and he didn't even really tell me. Long story short, I found out about it a few weeks later on an email that I just happened to be checking that I wasn't really supposed to even be checking anymore. It was an old account. And there was an email in there from my detailer saying that I had been selected to apply for this job at the White House. And I was supposed to have my package in 5 days. So I scrambled really quickly to try to get everything in. So I was like, there's no way I can do this. And I'm in Iraq. It's not going to happen. But my wife encouraged me to go ahead and give it a try, saying it might be important someday that I was considered for it. That makes some sense to me. So I went ahead and scrambled to get everything in there. I figured I didn't have much of a chance. I figured everybody would have nice squared away packages, and I was kind of like a pile of garbage, when it was all said and done. But I got it all in by the deadline. I didn't hear anything for about 2.5 months, not a single word. And then I guess I checked that email again, and it's been a while since I checked it, about 7 to 10 days since I checked it. There was an email in there from my detailer again saying, hey, you've been selected as one of 3 people to interview for the job at the White House. And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe I made it to this point, but I figured this is where the road ends. It's pretty much over at this point because there's no way I'm going to be at the White House in 5 days. I'm out in the middle of the desert. Well, it just so happens that the commanding general that controls all the Marines out there in Iraq at the time, his name, he used to be the military aide, the guy that carries the nuclear football with Bush 41, with the first President Bush. Well, he knew exactly what I was being asked to do, and he knew what kind of opportunity this was for me. He took it upon himself to make sure that I got to take advantage of it. So he called me to his office and he said, hey, tell me what's going on. I told him the story. He said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, sir, there's no way I'm going to be in D.C. in 5 days, but I'm going to go ahead and see if I can do a video teleconference or maybe a phone conference, and I'll give it my best shot, but I don't have to tell you about it. And he said, hang on. He picked the phone up and he called the air boss, the guy that controls all the air assets, the helicopters, the planes, all that kind of stuff. Talked to him. Last thing he says is, I want to flat out of here by sunset. He just hangs the phone up. And he tells me, go pack your crap, you're leaving. I said, yes, sir. So I went back to my hooch. I got my sea bag. I threw some stuff in it. I went out to the flight line. I got the helicopter. I flew to Baghdad. Got to Baghdad. I got on a C-5 cargo plane full of broken helicopters. Flew back to Cherry Point, North Carolina. Got a rental car. Drove to Virginia Beach, where I was living at the time. I'd been running every morning and every evening. I was just PTing like crazy out there, but when we weren't getting casualties, I was just working out all the time. I've lost 40 pounds, so none of my clothes fit. I was supposed to interview 2 days in a suit and 1 day in a uniform. So I was kind of panicked. So I was supposed to be at the White House the next morning for dinner. So I ran down to the men's warehouse. I bought a new suit. I begged them to tailor it for me right on the spot. They helped me get it presentable. I brought my uniform in. I begged them to help me fix that. They did. Then I jumped back in my rental car. I drove to the White House. I interviewed for the job for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, they told me I got the job. I got back on the plane, went back to Iraq for 4 months, finished my tour there, and then came straight from Iraq to the White House. And that was in 2006. And I was the new junior physician for President Bush and Mrs. Bush. And so I took care of the Bush family for about 3 years. It was awesome. I'm still close to them. I still stay in touch with them. Every time I'm in Dallas, I swing by and make sure I either go by the office and talk to the president, or I go over to the house and see them. And they were the very first people to contribute to my campaign here, my congressional campaign that I'm in now. The very first check I got out of my new congressional P.O. box was from George and Laura Bush. So they've been great supporters of mine. And I did that. I was only supposed to be there for 3 years, and then I was supposed to roll out and do something different because you just get 3 orders there. But it just so happens that those other 5 positions I was telling you about, they were much senior to me. They were all colonels and captains in the military, and they had already had 20-plus years in, and 4 out of the 5 of them just retired at the end. So there was a big leadership gap. Suddenly I went from being one of the most junior guys to one of the most senior guys. So right before the Bush administration ended, the Pentagon extended me on active duty at the White House for another 3 years and made me the deputy director of the White House Medical Unit. I did that for a couple of years. I did okay doing that. They extended me again as the director of the White House Medical Unit, and then as the physician to the White House. the position of the president, assistant to the president, and eventually chief medical advisor to the president. So I ended up being at the White House for over 13 years on active duty. And I was going to leave actually at the beginning of the Trump administration because I'd already put on Admiral. I'd already picked up, I was already a flag officer. I already had over 20 years in, and I was looking forward to getting out. So I was planning to retire, but it just so happened when the Trump administration arrived, the transition team was made up of all Bush people because they were the ones that had the expertise on how to transition a new administration into the West Wing. And so the Trump people had reached out to them for their expertise and they formed the transition team. Well, they all knew me from the Bush years. They were all friends of mine. I'd taken care of them and their families. So when they found out I was still at the White House, they started a campaign to keep me there. So eventually they talked me into staying, and I stayed on to be the new senior position and the position of the president for President Trump. And then President Trump and I just got along really well. I mean, we hit it off right off the bat. You know, my office in the White House is directly below his bedroom. And every morning he would come down, you know, he'd be up hours before everybody else got to work at the White House, you know, watching TV, talking on the phone, tweeting, whatever he was doing. And when he would come down, he would be ready to engage with somebody on something. He was looking for somebody to talk to. Every morning he'd come down, I'd be the very first person he'd see in the morning. I'd be the very last person he'd see when he went back upstairs in the evening. And so we just got in the habit of, he'd come in and ask me to see this, to see that, and we'd start up a conversation. And I just got into the habit of walking into work every morning. So probably 3 out of 5 mornings, I'd walk into work in the Oval Office. I'd just walking down the West Colonnade, the Oval Colonnade, right into the back of the Oval Office. And, you know, I'd go in there, we'd finish up our conversation, and the National Security Advisor, the Chief of Staff, whoever would be in the outer Oval kind of waiting to come in. And when I finished on him, I'd walk out, they'd walk in, and he'd start his day. So he and I developed a really close relationship. He developed a lot of trust and confidence in me. On and on, and eventually he nominated me for Secretary of the VA, and then I ultimately ended up being his chief medical advisor for the last year and a half I was there. And I was supposed to retire from the military and leave the White House this summer. That was my plan. I told him that I was going to be leaving in the summer, and he's like, all right, and I'd already picked somebody to take my place, and I was grooming him to do so. But what happened is Matt Thornberry kind of unexpectedly announced that he wasn't going to run for office again, and he's from the 13th Congressional District up here. Now, mind you, I grew up in Levelland, which is just inside the 19th Congressional District, just a few miles from the district line of 13, but it's in the base of the Panhandle. And that's where I was born and raised, and I've been a Texas resident my entire life. And I said, you know what, this is a unique opportunity for me to make a real difference. And I say that because I was already planning to retire from the military. Matt Thornberry announced that he wasn't going to run again in the 13th Congressional District, which in my mind were my people, the people I grew up with. And I told myself, I said to myself, these are the people that I can really represent if I decide I want to run for office. I mean, I can represent them without changing anything about who I am, politically, socially, economically, culturally. I'm on the same page as them. So that in combination with the fact that this was going to be an open seat, and I was already planning to get out of the Navy in the coming months. And then I realized one key thing: the president's getting reelected. I mean, the Democrats went too far down the path, and it was obvious that there's no way they could turn that bus around. They had already blown it, and President Trump was going to get another term, and he was going to be our president for another 4 years. That's when I said, I can really make a difference here. I can get elected at the 13th Congressional District. I can represent those people well, and I can get back in the fight, and I can do something to salvage what's happening in our country right now. So that's what led me here, and that's I got out of the Navy on December the 1st, just a few days before the filing deadline. I jumped right in the race, and we've been going strong ever since.
And you found yourself in a runoff in that race. So we'll get back to that here in a minute. But, obviously with all of your experience in the White House as a medical advisor, working closely with presidents, as you look at this coronavirus response, I mean, the first question that comes to my mind is, did the president contact you at all about being part of the response team when they started to ramp this up?
Not being part of the response team, but immediately they tapped me to basically to be a part of what was going on at the White House and be a surrogate for getting the message out. So that's what I'm doing now. And I was at the White House on Friday, and I talked to the president on Friday, talked to the vice president, talked to the Secretary of Energy. I saw Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, Leader McCarthy. I saw lots of folks there, talked to a lot of folks. I spent most of the day up there on Friday, talked to a lot of people on the task force, Dr. Fauci, and a bunch of folks up there about some of this stuff. So, yes, I've been involved in it. I really can't be a member of the task force and also be a congressional candidate for the 13th congressional district right now. But I'm actively involved in what's going on. I'm communicating with the White House every single day via email and telephone. And like I said, I was up there in person, get some face-to-face briefs on some stuff on Friday. And I've been actively out there on TV representing what's really going on in the White House and, what they're doing to combat this. And I was the perfect choice for that because I was a part of that for 3 years. For 3 years, I led part of the pandemic response stuff with regards to the Office of the Presidency. That was a big part of my job, contingency planning for the White House and and everybody involved in the Executive Office of the President. So, yeah, I've been very actively involved in what's going on with COVID-19.
So are things going as planned based on your experience leading that pandemic task force when you were in the White House? And what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about how the president is leading this response?
No, everything's going really well. The president's been very decisive about this. He struck exactly the right tone. He started off pretty aggressive. I mean, I was talking yesterday to somebody on the radio, and I was saying, this man could walk on water, and the narrative from the press would be that he can't swim. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's President Trump with the far left and with the liberal press. So we all know that at this point. But he was criticized, harshly for blocking travel from China, and it turns out that saved countless lives in this country by doing that, and it was exactly the right thing to do. And he was criticized by the left for that. Now they're big fans of it because they see that it actually worked and that it was key in preventing lots of deaths here in the country. He followed that with the travel restrictions from Europe as soon as that became a hot spot. He's worked closely with governors and local leaders all over the country. He's got a fantastic team behind him. I worked with those guys. I know them all. He's got a bunch of people from the National Security Staff, from NIH, the CDC, Homeland Security, Department of Defense, all these HHS, all these organizations have come together with the absolute experts in the country, and they're a great team. And they're working off the data. As the data changes, the plan changes a little bit, but the president's done a great job of walking the line between being a protector of our health and our wealth in this country and also being a leader to make sure that people in this country are reassured that we're going to get out of this and we're going to be healthy and our economy is going to recover. And that's what's going to happen. He's done a great job. Initially I was very kind of disgusted and discouraged by some of the political spin that was on this by the left. And they just saw it as another opportunity, quite honestly, to take the president down. They've been trying to do it since before he was even sworn in. They've been trying to do it. And every time they fell with one attempt, they picked up with another attempt of a different type. And that's all this was to them at the beginning. And to be honest with you, it's a little bit shameful, but there's still people on the left that are rooting for this to go south and for this to become much bigger deal for our economy to completely crash. And that's just a shame because it's time for all of us to come together as Americans and forget about what party you're aligned with and make sure that we make it through this and that we do recover our economy and we make sure that nobody dies from this that doesn't need to. And the president's done a great job with that leadership.
Now here in Texas, we've seen the Republican leadership steer this in a somewhat of a different direction than what we've seen in California, Louisiana, New York, these hotbed areas where there are these massive amounts of cases. Meanwhile, as we look at, I'm actually looking at the DSHS numbers right now in Texas, and, Texas 13 hasn't completely missed the boat on this. There certainly are several counties with some higher case counts, but then you also have counties that don't have any cases reported. So how do you look at the balance of this rural and urban divide in a district like Texas 13? And how do you think leaders, should approach issuing these guidelines for these communities that are experiencing this response in vastly different ways?
Well, that's just another example of President Trump's leadership on this, because he said 1,000 times, and he reiterated that yesterday, that really the governors, the states, to be taking charge of the states and deciding exactly where that line's at, what restrictions are out there. And he's really allowed that to happen. And Governor Abbott's done a fantastic job as well. I'll praise him all day long on what he's done on this. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he held off for a long time, and he let local leaders, that were beneath him, mayors of some of the big cities, and up here was the mayor of Wichita Falls and the mayor of Amarillo, they independently made decisions about whether or not and when they would issue shelter-in-place, recommendations and orders. And, everybody in Texas politics is, sensitive enough to know that, these are shelter-in-place recommendations for us, not orders. Nobody in Texas wants the government to be telling them, if and when they can come out of their house and if and when they can, do certain things. And so they've been very good about the way that they pitch this so that people are okay with it and that people are cooperating. And, people up here in the Panhandle of Texas and North Texas, they're good neighbors first and foremost. So if you can pitch this and you can tell people like, we need you to do this to keep your neighbors safe, and it's going to be a little bit painful. It's going to hurt your pocketbook on a personal level. It's going to be impactful to our economy here and everything. But hang in there, we'll make it through. But we need to come together as neighbors and make this happen. And that's what's happened up here. People have followed their guidance. I think that we're going to be good here. And I'll tell you, I hope I'm not wrong about this, but I've been saying this since day one. I think that this is going to be a seasonal issue. I think as things warm up here and spring turns into summer and the weather gets warmer in the next few weeks, this is going to start falling off rapidly. And this virus is going to start going away. All the places that have it right now, like New York and Louisiana and Florida and places like that, they're going to start seeing the numbers decline, and they're going to get on the backsides of those curves. Now, there's going to be some encroachment where it's pushing out from those areas, coming towards us in certain areas, in certain rural areas, like the Panhandle of Texas. But I don't think it's going to have time. I think that it's going to run out of road before it gets there. I think that the weather's going to warm up enough that we're going to be past it by the time it has an opportunity to really get here and have an impact like it has up in the Northeast and on the West Coast. So I think we're blessed in that regard. And if it does get here, we're going to be much better prepared because all of those things that the president has put in place, the public and private partnerships and, engineering systems to get gloves and masks and ventilators and medications and vaccinations and everything in the works, we're going to have a big head start on that because a lot of that stuff's going to already be done by the time it gets here, if it gets here, which I don't think that it will.
Now, the CDC has recently reversed course on the guidelines regarding just average Americans wearing a face mask. And we're starting to see that in some Texas counties and cities, elected officials are ordering or at least harshly recommending, strongly recommending that citizens wear a face mask. From the medical perspective, how do you think the average citizen should take these course reversals from the CDC and other officials as we learn more about this virus? I know the knee-jerk reaction is to say, see, they knew all along, but is it really, can you really hold these groups accountable for learning about this virus on the go? And how should citizens view these changes and recommendations?
No, I think people shouldn't view them too suspiciously. I mean, was there some motivation early on to not make that recommendation? Probably so, because to be honest with you, there were a finite number of masks that were immediately available. And the people that really, really need those masks are the first responders and the people that are working in the hospitals that are taking care of these patients, not the general public. But I think that all along a mask wasn't a bad idea. And I say that not because I think that, and it depends on where you're at and what you're doing. I'm not wearing a mask right now, and I don't have a mask, and I'm not wearing one most of the time. I'm just maintaining distance when I go out, and but I'm not packed tightly in a subway system or on a bus or something with somebody. But the main thing the mask does is it prevents you from touching your mouth and your nose, and I think that's the biggest value with the mask. It just provides that barrier, because if you really stop and think about it, you touch your face multiple times during the day, completely subconsciously. You don't realize that you're doing it. You touch your mouth, you touch your nose, you whatever. And what it does is it reminds you, first it provides a physical barrier so that you're not touching your face and your mouth, and it reminds you not to touch your face and your eyes. And so I think that it provides value. If you're actively coughing and sick, it could prevent you from passing that to somebody else.
So you are saying that even if it's just a cloth covering that you make from a bandana or a t-shirt at home, that's better than nothing in terms of protecting yourself if you've got to go out and you want that protection?
Absolutely. I think if you go out, do it, it's fine. The main thing is to make sure that you're washing your hands as frequently as possible, using hand sanitizer. But if you go out and you touch something that's infected, somebody that has the virus coughs on something, you touch it, and then you, in short order, end up touching your nose or your mouth. That's how you're going to get this. So if you're washing your hands, using hand sanitizer, and you have your nose and your mouth covered with some type of covering, there's going to be much less likely. You're going to be much less likely to do that and to get infected. So I think it's not a bad idea.
Now, we're getting ready to wrap up here, but obviously with the news that has been making headlines over the past couple of days, in your experience as a retired Rear Admiral, I'm curious what you make of what's been happening with the Naval Command over the past week. Are you surprised to see, these kind of, I don't know how to describe it, these outspoken leaders in this military command? And what do you think has kind of opened the door for all of this that's happened in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think the captain, the commanding officer of that carrier that's involved in all of this, I imagine that he was legitimately trying to do what he thought was right for his crew, but he made a serious mistake. You can't do that. You can't be in command of a nuclear carrier, one of the biggest bats that we have in our entire arsenal, and make an announcement like that or say something like that and let it get leaked to the press. It's a big national security issue for us. We do not need our enemies and our adversaries knowing that people have anything on our ships, that one of our ships might be taken out of commission because of coronavirus. That's not information that we need our adversaries to know about. Not that it did create a lot of panic on the ship and panic with the families. I mean, can you imagine if you were a parent and you heard that, and, your daughter or your son was on that carrier, you'd be panicked that, that something bad was going to happen to them. That was a crew of young, healthy folks. And even the ones that got it were going to do really well with that. The chances that somebody got really sick on that ship and died because they were on that ship and they couldn't get ashore are next to none. So he made a poor decision in writing that letter and pushing it out to so many people that he did, and allowing it to get leaked out like that. And he took some members of his chain of command out of the process when he did it. So the Navy did the right thing by dismissing him. Like I said, I'm sure he was well intentioned, but he did not handle that properly.
Well, Admiral, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've got a lot going on and continuing to serve the people there in Texas 13 as you make the case for your candidacy. As we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to speak directly to the voters there in Texas 13 and a reminder that the runoff election has been pushed back to July 14th. That's correct?
That's right. It's been moved to July the 14th. So I would say, out and vote. Vote for me on July the 14th, and I'm going to make you proud. I think that you have to look at what I can bring to the fight versus my opponent. And the guy that's running against me right now, he's a lobbyist for the Carpenters Association. He's a nice man, but he doesn't bring the influence and the ability to make a difference to the district that I do. I tell people all the time that Max Thornberry's been here for 26 years. He's got a lot of influence. Being here 26 years, when he speaks, people listen. When he's got a problem with the issue, they want to help him fix it. But the day he leaves, that goes to zero. That you're going to have a freshman congressman in there that's going to have no influence whatsoever for the next 6 to 8 years. That's just the way DC is. It's engineered that way. And I am the exception to that. And I'm not the exception because of Ronny Jackson. I mean, that's part of it, I guess. But I'm the exception to the circumstance. I just came from the White House. I spent every day, all day long in the White House, working side by side with President Trump and his cabinet. And I have influence in D.C. right now that will benefit the district greatly. I know every single cabinet secretary. I have their home phone number and their cell phone number. Whether it's agriculture, commerce, energy, defense, to the VA, they're all friends of mine. I took care of them and their families for the last 3 years. I know everyone in the West, from Chief of Staff, National Security Advisor, Domestic Policy Council, friends of mine. I will be, if I'm fresh enough to represent this district, the only freshman congressman in the country that can literally walk into the Oval Office of the United States and tell the president, sir, I have something I need to make you aware of, and he will stop what he's doing and listen to him. So that just brings a lot of influence that the district is about to lose with their long-term representative retiring, that I can bring back to the district, and I can make a difference here. Vote for me, and I promise I'll make you proud. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, if people want to find out more about you and your campaign, now's a great time to give us your website, social media links. Where do people find you and your campaign?
All right. Well, if you want to go to my website, it's www.ronnyjackson, RONNY Jackson, FOR, Texas, TXAS 13. So it's all spelled out. Ronny Jackson 4, Texas 13, 13. And you can find access to my other stuff on there. But my Facebook is Ronny Jackson number 4, Texas 13. So go there and look me up and follow me, push it out to anybody you know in the 13th Congressional District, and help me get my message out. I'd like your consideration.
Excellent. Admiral, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get past this coronavirus response and bring you back on before the runoff so we can talk a little bit more about the policies and things like that that you are promoting to voters. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Admiral. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you again to Admiral Jackson for joining us. Thank you to you for listening. I know that was so much to unpack, but I mean, he's got such great experience, especially when it comes to what we're dealing with, what the president is dealing with. It was great to talk to him. And like I told him, if we can have him on again before the runoff on July 14th, we will certainly do so. That goes for all candidates. If you want to come on the Big Texas podcast, you can do these phone interviews as well as we continue to social distance. You can hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Big Texas Podcast, or follow Texas Young Republicans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We appreciate everyone who is listening, who is helping share the podcast, who's connecting us with candidates. I'm also really enjoying seeing how candidates are doing their part to stay engaged. Will Douglas, friend of the podcast over in HD 113, is on some compound pharmacies, and he was actually explaining today how you can now use Everclear with some other ingredients to make hand sanitizer. So that's what his compound pharmacies are doing. They're actually making hand sanitizer, and they're donating them to the first responders there in Dallas County. So if you have not followed your local elected officials and your state representative, your state senator, your congressman, this is the time to make sure that you are doing it. Go to their social media pages, make sure you're following them so you can stay informed on what it is that they are doing, how they are, keeping their constituents informed, what they're doing in this response, and what you can do to help them in that effort. We're all doing this together. It's Texans helping Texans. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. Coronavirus is tough, but Texans are tougher. All right. So we are going to get through this together. Again, I appreciate it. As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button on iTunes or Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get this. Make sure if you got a chance, leave us a rating. I know you've got some time. Come on. You're sitting at home, you've been binge watching Tiger King, you're waiting for the new episode. Take a second, leave us a rating. It really helps improve the visibility of the podcast so these candidates can get in front of more voters. That's what we want to do. We want voters to be informed, know more about the candidates. This is how we are doing it. Again, thank you as always. Until next time, friends. We'll see you down the road.